Welcome back. You're listening to a special edition of Ask the CIO, sponsored by Looking Glass on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Aaron Joe, the Director of the Cyber Threat Intelligence Integration Center in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Aaron, before we break, we're learning a little bit about your background a little bit. You came over from the FBI as a detailee. You also talked about kind of the two big aha moments. We talked about value, and then the other part of it was preparedness, which I think is fascinating. And I just want to dig a little bit into that preparedness idea. One of the things you mentioned was one of the things CTIC did was work with the kind of government-wide exercises around training, planning, preparedness, and you guys developed, I think you said, 7 initiatives. And one of those was around the this idea of the exercises and plans and preparedness. So if you're able to talk a little bit more about what that it meant and what it is and what it looked like, and give us a little more details.
Sure. At the national level, there's a national level exercise that all of government participates in on a regular basis and recurring basis. And they are based on scenarios that are designed to tease out all those areas of government where we would have key decision points to make or key integration that we would want to exercise well in advance of any event or occurrence. Some of those historically have been in the terrorism, on the terrorism topic, because terrorism obviously was something that we needed to come very closely together on as a government and make sure that we could work as seamlessly as possible. Cyber is one of those now that we recognize is of great importance, and we want to increase and enhance our preparedness across the whole of government. So for over a year, CTIC has been working with others in government to craft the scenario in a way that will help tease out those areas across government so that we can practice our communications, our collaboration, our authorities, our capabilities well in advance of an event. So we've been crafting the scenario. We've been working with our outside partners as well as inside partners so that we can understand where some of those points are of concern that we would want to exercise and improve upon. This has been building over time. So it's not just a single event, it's been building. So in government, we have multiple layers of exercises that happen, and CTIC is supporting it at every level, building up to that national level exercise. Another thing I would love to mention that I think has been fantastic is several entities within the National Security Council, one that covers resiliency, and another that covers intelligence, and another that covers cyber, have decided to come together as part of those levels of preparedness that I've been talking about and bring together those elements and partners in government to have these conversations at multiple decision-making levels, again, well in advance, so we can work on preparedness. One of the major initiatives this year in government is to make sure that we are including the sector-specific agencies to the greatest extent possible. That's part of our initiative in CTIC, and it's also part of a national initiative as well. So, for example, the scenario may involve something along the lines of a cyber event that would then trigger physical consequences as well as cyber effects or consequences. And if that happens, then we have so many different layers of and agencies in government that play a critical role. And sometimes we haven't interacted all that often or frequently. So this gives us an opportunity to figure those things out. A perfect example of this is FEMA. FEMA is one of those agencies that has a lead responsibility when there's a physical event, and they make sure that they come in and orchestrate government to operate a particular way. Well, intelligence components don't typically work with FEMA on a regular basis in cyber. This is something that's developing. I'm not saying we never do, but it's not a common partner. So how do we partner with FEMA and make sure that we get the information to them? I'll give you another example. The sector-specific agencies, one of them for commercial physical locations is GSA. Obviously, GSA is very concerned about any event that could impede our ability to get into these physical locations that so many of us in government report to work at every single solitary day. But yet CTIC doesn't necessarily interact with GSA on a regular basis from an intelligence perspective. That was another aha moment in my position to say, you know what, I need to make sure that we are connected. We do think of them because they do need to know the intelligence that we know, and how will that intelligence flow, and how can we improve that so that if there were a cyber event that had physical ramifications, we could connect those parts and pieces faster.
And this is becoming even more important, and I think as goes back to maybe tag back to the value piece, is that if you think about a GSA location, and I work with GSA closely, I love to quote unquote pick on them, right? But they do a great job, but their buildings, their HVAC, right, or their all the technology that feeds into the telecommunications, all of that is now considered technology, and it's critical infrastructure. And therefore,
right.
If something goes down, that just doesn't affect you from an intelligence community perspective. If there's an attack of the critical infrastructure, it affects the ability just for somebody at GSA to award a contract to get medical supplies or just to get IT services. And that interconnection, I think, is starting to come through. And I think that's why I think the national level exercises are so interesting. Can you go back as well about the National Security Council just a little bit? I know there may be some sensitivities, but is it a series of meetings that from the director level on down to the field level? Are you able to kind of, when you say there's multiple decision-making levels or working on preparedness, what's that look like generally speaking?
The National Security Council works at multiple levels, and we have different groups that meet under the council. So for example, there's a cyber response group, there's a resiliency group, there's an intelligence group, and others. And typically, those will be at, so as a director, I participate in those, and there will be other directors or deputy directors or at that senior level that meet on a regular basis to talk about those issues and problems and concerns and current threats and whatever it is that's of particular interest to that group at that time. The brilliance of this new way of looking at the preparedness capabilities is bringing those together across government and yep. Facilitating conversations to bring in all of those partners that maybe each one of those elements works with on a regular basis, so that we can work better across.
They always say FEMA, the very famous saying across FEMA is you shouldn't be shaking hands for the first time with someone when you walk into the disaster. And I think that from a cyber perspective is also something that's really come into focus in the last 5-10 years or so. I want to move us over to a different discussion because there's plenty to talk to here, but you talked about your staff a little bit and how CTIC is made up of a lot of detailees. There's, I think, two pieces to that is where do you find the people, right? Because cyber expertise is in limited resources, and there's maybe a little bit of a concern that says, well, are you robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, because you're taking cyber experts from one agency and putting them into another agency. Walk me through the kind of that process and how you kind of find that right balance.
Well, thank you very much for bringing that out today, because we want to dispel some of those concerns. We are very sensitive not to do the things that you're describing. So we are, again, our very small center. We bring joint duty assignees from different agencies into our space, but there aren't very many. There's only a few from each of the agencies that participate. So it's not like we're taking hundreds of people from each of those agencies. We're taking just a few. So if each agency can give us just a few, or as each agency gives us just a few, that gives us the ability to provide some of that interconnectivity that we've talked about, as well as the reach back into their own agencies. Another thing is that we're very cognizant of the limited cyber expertise, particularly in government. We do not want to rob from that pool. We want those experts with that expertise in the places where they can add the most value. And for CTIC, the way we view it is we want to bring smart analysts, qualified analysts, people who know a lot about perhaps a country threat or some other area of expertise, but they want to learn more about cyber, and they bring their analytic rigor and expertise, but we put them into a cyber environment where they can learn more about cyber. We also provide training opportunities. So the analysts that come to our JDA location are able to get paid training so that they can increase their own cyber knowledge and expertise. So between training and awareness on a daily basis, we're providing a service to the community, because as those JDAers go back into their agencies, they now have greater knowledge and expertise of cyber. And finally, this is a really important piece. We always talk about cyber as being a team sport. There's no agency out there that thinks they can do this by themselves. Well, that means we have to learn how to integrate. CTIC provides a real life example of what integration looks like. It gives a great understanding of how each agency views the cyber problem, how each agency works. So our JDAers get the opportunity to sit next to their peers from other agencies, learn more about them, exemplify integration so that they will go back to their agencies and remember how to be better interconnected across government.
I think that's very helpful, because I think the joint duty piece is key as well, because you're learning, hey, if I only have an NSA perspective, I'll never learn what the CIA does, or vice versa. If I bring it in the FBI perspective like you did, you may not understand, oh, okay, that's how DIA does it. But by having that other connection with that person, makes such sense. We're gonna have to take a quick break before we do that. Let me just ask you, there's been some reorganizations going on throughout the IC community. Acting DNI Grinnell talked about just recently in the last month or so, creation of a new IC cyber executive. It seems to me that CTIC maybe fits under there. What can you tell us about what this newer reorganization is going to affect CTIC, if at all?
It will bring together several elements within the ODNI into a single office. And I'm very excited because I think it will provide that focal point that ODNI can then provide on the cyber, to enhance their cyber posture. So I think this is a great thing, and I'm looking forward to that reorganization to improve our ability to defend in the cyber realm.
Okay, I know there'll be probably much more to talk about as we kind of see things kind of play out a little bit over the next couple months or so. So more to catch up with you there. Aaron, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation. My guest is Aaron Joe, the Director of the Cyber Threat Intelligence Integration Center in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to a special edition of Ask the CIO, sponsored by Looking Glass on Federal News Network.